Welcome everyone, Costin here with the discussion about Total War Pharaoh. And this is my campaign as Urso at turn 59. It's not the only campaign that I've played. I have played multiple campaigns. I have a whole list of campaigns that I've played over here. Turn 51 as Urso. In a vanilla experience campaign, legendary autosave all that. Shupalium at turn 17. Ramses. This is the tutorial campaign. The way the tutorial campaign works is you start in a very limited campaign and it becomes a regular campaign on easy. So that's what I was doing there. I'm in mess. This is also vanilla legendary, but with autosave turned off. So I have regular saves over here. You can turn that off in campaign customization. You can turn Iron Man mode off. This is what I've done for that particular campaign. But outside of that, it is a vanilla experience campaign. And I don't think I want to play vanilla experience in this game anymore. Like, I did it for the sake of understanding how things are. It's gonna be interesting doing ranking videos for this game because everyone can customize their campaigns in a very different way. I guess you start with the vanilla experience and go from there. Then a Shupalium 32 turns campaign that, by the way, is 1. Yes, turn 32, actually even earlier. And then this campaign, which I've won. Ultimate victory. Well, one measly PowerPoint. Well, I did succeed it, and then I lost some territory that I went down because Amon Mess ended up at war with me after I vassalized them. I'll explain why that happened in just a bit. So, let's talk about this game. And let's talk about the fundamentals of the campaign experience. Battles I'll cover in a separate video. So, this is the map. You've got Anatolia, not all of it, but parts of it. The eastern part of Anatolia over there. So Troy, yeah, you see that? That's where Troy Total War took place. So we're here in Hatti. So here, this is Hatti. Hafusa, their capital. You've got Hatti, you've got Canaan, and you've got Egypt. This is the campaign map. How does this campaign map work? How is it designed? Well, the two things that are very important on this campaign map. One, it's the invasion of the sea peoples and the desert nomads that just keep spawning in the western part of the desert, like all along this coast. So like there's desert people spawning from here basically all the way to here or even more to the north. Now, they're not just going to attack the nearby settlement. No. These guys are more sneakier than that. They might just march all the way to the Nile to sack a settlement there. What the Sea Peoples... now, these are rogue armies, effectively. And it's kind of like a slow-building endgame crisis, really. Because you start with a couple of them with, like, say, 11 units, low-tier units. And then you get higher and higher tiers. And then you get new factions being added. Like, you get some factions early on, like the Libu invaders, the Libyans, basically. And then you just build up to stronger and stronger factions. And by the way, Hatti is kind of screwed. That's actually something that's even mentioned in the trailer, because you've got you've got Casca invaders coming in from the north that are threatening the capital. You've got invaders from the west on land, and then you got invaders via the sea. Yeah, Hatti is surrounded and more or less screwed in a significant number of ways in terms of their campaign situation. It's going to be complicated, I think, to deal with. Now, what do these invaders want? They will attack random settlements quite often, but what they're really after is to bring about the ruin of civilization. So is Urso, though. Fun fact, you don't really want to play Urso like that. You don't want to burn the entire map to the ground. You can, and you have the ability of doing so, and you can benefit from it, but generally it's actually better to keep civilization intact as Urso. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. Like, the guy who's like, I'm just gonna ruin everything, he's actually like, I'm doing the hardest I possibly can in this campaign to keep civilization intact. Say hello to glorious Pharaoh Urso. I'll get into that in just a moment, though. So, what they want is to bring about the downfall of civilization. How does that work exactly? And why do they want to bring it? Well, the more civilization goes down, so you've got 3 tiers. You've got prosperity, you've got Crisis, and you've got Collapse. The worse it gets in terms of the civilization's strength, or in terms of civilization, the stronger they get. These guys can have tier 1 units that can feel like you're fighting tier 5 units. Like, look at the morale, 20% morale. And this is Crisis, this is not Collapse. It gets worse than Collapse. So 15 melee defense, 20% morale, a lot of movement, charge bonus. That's where I see people. The Nomads get melee attack, charge bonus, and melee defense, and attrition immunity. So if civilization collapses, they're far harder to get. They will not stop coming. You can disable it in campaign customization, but it's kind of like the main challenge. It is a proper endgame crisis, and it's not like just, 8 armies under Archeon spawn. No, it's a heck of a lot more than 8 armies. But how does civilization work? Well, civilization is defined by settlements. These pillars of civilization with the circles around them. So you can clearly see all the pillars of civilization on the map. These are it. These circles represent the pillars of civilization. What they really represent are either temples or special landmarks. But it's not the landmarks that matter. It's the main settlement building. The main settlement building in these settlements. So not in every settlement, but in these settlements. So a regular settlement building doesn't have civilization points. It's these settlements that have civilization points. They start at tier 3 with 10. They get to 30 at tier 4. They get to 50 at tier 5. These rogue armies, and you can see there's 3 armies. Actually, there were more of them. There's 4 right now over here, and that's just on the sea. There's probably just as many in the desert and in Hati. These rogue armies, they're going to try and strike those locations. They have the strength to win those siege battles. It might take them a while, and they might not do it very effectively, and generally the AI factions can wipe them out early on. It's going to get worse as you progress in the campaign. So you're trying to expand, you're trying to take territory, you're trying to build an economy, and mind you, I've built a very powerful economy. I'm earning a lot of money. I'm in a surplus right here. But you will constantly have these invaders that are going to come in and ruin your day, and they can wipe out entire factions. Like over here, like you've got these 2 armies, they can do a lot of damage to Corinta, who I might add is my vassal in this case. Yeah, say hello to the master diplomat that is Ursu. Some of the things I've done in this campaign are absurd, but I love it. Like, I actually do love the campaign customization. I've had a lot of fun with that. I'll talk about what I think the best settings for that are in a separate video, but it does create a far better campaign dynamic dependent on what you choose to go with. Could use more options though. Okay, so that is one of your main goals in the campaign. The way you win the campaign though, it's not to keep civilization intact. You may not care. You need to take territory. You have several ways. You can either take territory that's near you, so basically in this case, like Canaanite territory, so I took most of that. You then got foreign conquest in either Egypt or Hati. In this case, right? If you're Egypt, homeland would be Egypt. Foreign conquest would be Canaanites and Hati. Though I think it depends on legendary lord by legendary lord level. Then you've got the cult centers, those landmarks, those pillars of civilization. You've got feats of rule like becoming a pharaoh. Doing your ancient legacy aspect. I'll talk about that as well in a separate video, but I'll dive into some details here as well. Favor with the gods, survive until 100, turn 140, accrue legitimacy. Legitimacy is important for ruling. The way that works is like you have either the Hittite crown or the Egyptian crown. And you need to gain legitimacy points. How do you gain legitimacy points? Is you either fight battles. Once you've declared that you want to gain the throne, you capture these gold bar settlements, or the gold tinted settlements, right? That will give you some legitimacy points. You can get them from landmarks, you can get them from characters, you can get them even from research, yes. From royal decrees, the research tree. Though that's specific to Canaanites, because like this is going to add 8 legitimacy per defensive or military alliance. You think becoming a master diplomat was by choice? No. No, it was something, I think it's Canaanites exclusive research. Like the Egyptians don't have it. Don't think the Haitians have it either. The Hittites, sorry. Not the Haitians. What the hell am I talking about? So you want to build up. You can either go for the Hittite throne or you can go for the Pharaoh throne. There's pros and cons with both of them, but the basic system that works is like you go for one or the other. You build legitimacy by capturing sanctuary lands in either Egypt or Hatti, and winning battles, landmarks, research, all that. And then you have a lovely civil war. Though the civil war is not necessarily a big, massive fight. It can be, but you don't necessarily need to fight anyone. You just, that's also vying for the crown, that is. You can just be fighting other people and just gaining legitimacy and winning the race. That's actually what I did. I didn't fight Tosret or Seti or anyone else except Ramesses. I wiped him out, took his territory, but didn't fight Tosret or Amon-Mes. Like, actually, I vassalized Amon-Mes. The reason I'm in war with him is something that happens when, like, vassalization plays a major role in this game. Because to achieve your win condition, you can get to this point. Like, the reason I've done it is because, well, I have a lot of vassals. It's not just because I get a lot of territory. Like, I don't necessarily have a huge amount of territory. It's like my vassals and allies that have combined a lot of territory. But the problem is that when a new Sea People's faction shows up, they'll immediately declare war on you and everyone else. But you'll be the first one to declare war on. And you're vassal, and if you just recently vassalized the faction, they might just decide, hey, I'm out, which automatically starts a war between you and them. So that's a bit of an annoying issue. But that's the reason I'm at war with Amon-Mes at this particular point. Okay. That's how, that's just an idea about, like, about some of the campaign mechanics. What about gods? Let's talk about that. Well, in this case, I only have one god. Generally, you can worship up to 3 gods. You can increase the capacity through research. So you do get, like, god dedication slots. You start with one, and everyone starts with their own god. And then you can choose. You can replace a god. You can choose them. You can also dedicate one army, one general per god. So you basically can have 3 dedicated armies in a campaign. Then you've got 10, who's basically a super god. It's like he steals benefits from everyone else. I went with him. And then I kind of realized, ooh, I fucked up. Because if civilization collapses, then I start losing gold. And it's per shrine, per temple. Let me just go over that. So, here's how gods work in this game. You have worship, right? You gotta worship them. You get favor with the gods from 2 things. You either get them from temples, which can be built in settlements. So every provincial capital can have a temple. There's also some very special temples in certain cities. So, for instance, Damascus has the Grand Temple of Malak. Well, by the way, you start worshiping as Urso. In this case, because I'm worshipping Anton, it's telling me that it's on a building unavailable. So I really don't want to lose that building, by the way, because it's still a pretty powerful landmark. Aten has his drawbacks, suffice to say. But you either build one in a provincial capital, you either build a temple, or you can build a shrine. That's how you increase favor. And you can also pray at the shrine. Like, you can pray at the shrine to get various benefits. In this case, there's a heck of a lot of benefits that I can get. I chose to go, like, I can't say I quite remember exactly what combination of gods I used. But suffice to say, it's kind of bitten me in the ass as well, because I think it was, who was it? So we got Anubis, Isis, no, it's not Set. Was it Amon? No, Cyrus, no. Can't say. Anyway, the problem is that I chose that gold benefit. It wasn't just a gold benefit, to be fair, I might add. There were other things as well, but I chose that gold benefit, which is great when you're in prosperity or crisis, but if you go in collapse, it's gonna end very, very quickly. Like 15 turns ago, the civilization went to collapse, and I've been spending the last 15 turns rebuilding civilization because, mind you, I was causing the collapse because Ursu. It's a fun dynamic. So Ursu has an ability of literally causing the world to burn. So the wild card over here is playing Ursu, and like if you click his command, if you use his command, he's gonna let the world burn and reduce civilization by 20, and you can use that every season, like every year rather. Like it's once a year you can do that, and you're just causing civilization collapse by 20. But the thing is, that's, you know, that keeps going, right? But you're causing that, and well, I just kind of did. Why would Ursu care about it? Well, if the world is in crisis, you get your replenishment gets lowered, crucially, and your morale gets lower. Ursu, the way he works is that if he clicks, if he lets the world burn, he gets melee attack charge bonus morale, but he does cause that civilization collapse situation. But he's getting some of the benefits that these nomads and sea peoples are. He doesn't get the attrition benefit, but he gets charge bonus, melee attack, and morale, so that's significant. And he no longer has the replenishment downside in his campaign, which is probably the most important benefit as far as I'm concerned, really. So that's the reason you'd want to do it. The whole thing about not occupying settlements, by the way, is a lie. You just have to loot and occupy them. You can still take over settlements, they'll just be damaged. Not a big deal. Like, the resources for rebuilding settlements are plentiful. That's not the problem you're going to have in terms of money in a campaign. No, the problem you're going to have in terms of money in a campaign is going to be for units, for armies. Keep in mind, this is playing with like half the upkeep that you have by default, like in terms of campaign customization. So if I have upkeep lowered by 50%. Regular upkeep is an absolute nightmare to deal with, especially when it comes to bronze, but food is not exactly plentiful either, unless you're Egypt. The balance of economy, if you want to say it, is that Egypt is the economic powerhouse of the world here. Canaan is in between, and Hatti is poor as dirt in comparison. They're not completely terrible, but they just don't have the economic benefits that Egypt has. The buildings, the Legendary Lord benefits, and so on and so forth. Hatti does have probably the most powerful army in the game, however, that will genuinely defeat all the others, combined maybe, but they're lacking on the economy level. I guess that's how they decide to balance things out on the campaign map. Can't talk about like the late game stuff, like I don't know what happens, like they're teasing that something important happens after turn 100. Haven't gotten to that point, just been playing like early game campaigns, winning them in 60 turns. Like that's one goal I had in like 40 hours of play. Can I win campaigns in less than 40 turns? In less than 60 turns? Yes, even in vanilla experience you can. Like this particular campaign, which is vanilla with the exception of on legendary, I've achieved a victory. The minor victory, to be sure, but not too far away necessarily from major either. The customization that I'm using just allowing me to do it faster. So yeah, completed the campaign over there. Though I am kind of curious to see what happens in the long term over here. So going back to gods, that's how they work. You increase their level by building shrines and temples. You can pray at temples. You can pray at shrines for various army benefits. You can dedicate the general for one god regularly, or two with the 10, but you can only worship a 10 if you go down that path. A 10 is an ancient Egyptian legacy, and he's got some really powerful stuff, and he also has a unique city that you can only take if you worship him, which is a pillar of civilization as well, so you can increase civilization points on the campaign map if you're doing so. Let's talk about Outposts and Settlements. So one of the things they've done to really make the campaign map feel like it actually has some life in it is they've added outposts. So it's not just like, ooh, a bunch of spread out settlements with nothing in between. No, there are outposts, and they're actually quite important. Now, it can either be 2 outposts or 3 outposts in a region. I believe it depends on the settlement level. Or no, it doesn't depend on settlement level. It depends on the just the type, really. Like some only have like how the region is designed. Some have 2, some have 3. In terms of in terms of the design, some have even 4, like the capital of Egypt over here. But regardless of the number that a region may have, and that is going to vary from region to region, you get military outposts, which give you siege holdout time, or you can put a garrison that will support the settlement in a siege. This is something the AI loves doing, I should add. Like, the AI will build a lot of troops and put them in a garrison in every region in every region they control, or many of the regions they control, especially their crucial settlements. So you can either eliminate the garrison, attack it first, and then attack the settlement. Keep in mind, you're going to have to build siege equipment because it's a fort, basically. Or you can just attack the direct settlement, but keep in mind you're going to get reinforcements to support the defender. Then you've got administrative outposts. One of them can give you legitimacy. 1 legitimacy building limit per province. And then you get a way station, which gives you attrition immunity and influence. And all of these replenish 50% of movement points required to reach these outposts. So that's one of the main benefits, like they can give you extra movement points. Then there's the economic outpost, which increases resource production per region, so 10% resource production increased. And then finally, the religious buildings, religious outposts, the shrines that you do have in every region, if you so desire. The reason I'm screwed in this campaign, for instance, if we enter a civilization collapse, is I went with that 10 generating me extra gold, but only if it's prosperity or crisis. If it goes collapse, I start losing gold real quick because of that, because it's every single shrine that I have. I have a lot of them, as you might imagine at point. Great economic benefit when it works, but yeah, there's some downsides to that. You're not really supposed to do that. I think, like, it's a particular god. What is it, Horus, that you worship? I think it is Horus. You're not supposed to have every shrine doing this. It's probably not balanced around that. Now, outposts aside, how do settlement buildings work? Well, much the same as they did previously, but with a twist. So, compared to Troy, the main settlement building can generate resources, regular resources. You can have gold mines, it doesn't matter, right? So you can get those resources. You don't just generate resources in minor settlements. The resource production buildings have been severely limited. So if we look at the building browser over here, there's only 2 different resource buildings. One's a food one, one's a wood one, and the amount of resources you generate is far lower. Things aren't necessarily too expensive to get. It's the difficulty you're going to have in a campaign with economy is maintaining your armies. Armies are very expensive. Like, I think someone put it the best. The amount they cost is similar to Troy, but our economy is far smaller than Troy. It's not a problem when it comes to building settlements. Stone is the main resource that's used for that. And if I start looking at factions over here, you will see that a lot of them have like a massive surplus of stone. So the AI isn't particularly great though with building things up, but still, it's not really an issue to be able to afford things when you're talking about building them up. The cost is primarily stone. Stone can be very plentiful because it's obviously only used for structure, so it's not an issue. Wood is used for some structures, but the main costs that you're going to have with wood are actually going to come from building chariots. If you decide to build a lot of chariots, so far I have chosen not to do so. Different discussion about battles, but, well, let me just say it. A lot of battles, the vast majority of battles are going to be siege battles or minor settlement battles. You think chariots are good in those? They're not. That's why I didn't build them. I do use some of them, but I don't have a chariot build, the recruitment building. That's another thing, it's not worth it. Instead, I just use the special recruitment over here, vassal. It's fun that vassals do give you units, so instead of the allegiance system, being able to get some units. No, you can get a lot of units from some vassals, but they have to choose to gift them to you, more or less, in the campaign. But outside that, you still need to build up the main settlement building to get access to higher tier buildings, but there's the twist. Every building requires workforce. The workforce system is your surplus system that you currently have in Total War Warhammer. Now, the difference is that the workforce is generally far more plentiful, and you don't even want it to go up because you're gonna start losing a lot of happiness, and that's how rebellions can spark. Like, generally speaking, you wouldn't get a rebellion. You don't, like, you do want to keep your population happy because you have more workforce morale and recruitment, but you really don't want to just sit on a massive pile of workforce unless you have no choice. Like over here, I built everything that I could build over here in Damascus. There's nothing I can do with this workforce, so I'm just eating the cost. But at this point, I have so much happiness here, it's actually quite damn ridiculous what I'm getting in that particular situation. But typically speaking, it is pretty quick to get like surplus points. Like I'm gonna get free over here. I'm gonna have free idle workforce in one turn in the North Sinai province. So you can get that pretty quickly. There are structures that do improve it. Some generally like it starts slow, but once you get to like tier 3, the main settlement building does increase the amount of workforce you're getting. There's secondary buildings that do so, but one of the reasons you would want to upgrade the main building beyond having access to higher tier buildings is to get more workforce. You still need to do it. Keep in mind that you still need to do it to get access to these buildings, if I'm not mistaken. But really, the main reason you'd upgrade the main settlement building is to get more workforce. Influence is handled by unique structures related to that, and you need to try and keep everything happy, because if you have low influence, you're going to lose resources. You're not going to lose happiness. You're only going to lose happiness because of the workforce. There is no difficulty penalty. Thank fuck for that. Like, it's not because I'm customizing campaign. There's no change that you can do to change those kind of things. No, they finally have removed the difficulty modifier, public order penalty, in their games. Thank God. It's been a long time, CA. It's been a very long time. Could you remove it in Warhammer 3 as well? It's a worthless system. It would be great if you did. By the way, right now, your decision when it comes to happiness is like based on what you're building. You generally need to get some buildings, maybe even a commandment to increase happiness. But you do need to worry about various things. Ooh, attends holy grounds. Though these are like unique commandments because, yeah, unique city. So you can organize festivities for free happiness to increase that. The more happiness you get, the more workforce you get, the more influence you get, the more production you get. The less influence you have, the more your economy suffers. Having a province with low influence is a really bad idea, suffice it to say. And you do want to get workforce. Now, the less workforce you do have, the more your happiness goes out. So actually keeping your workers occupied is important in a campaign. Now, in terms of individual buildings, let's just go over here. It depends obviously who you're playing, because the key factor for Legendary Lords in this game for the rulers is that they do have unique buildings, but you do have administration in the provincial capitals. This can give you resource production, you can get influence, legitimacy, you can get happiness, construction time, diplomatic relations. I do have versus gold tally quarters for production of resource plus % in a province. I already have that. There's only one building type per faction allowed. And then you can get one monument of greatness for a lot of happiness, influence, victory points. Victory points are how you win the campaign, by the way. It's like you can get some victory points to help you win the campaign for structures and for ambitions. Talk about that in just a moment. Then you get landmarks, various benefits, civilization points, for instance, here with the Great Archives. production of all resources, all that, diplomatic relations, different landmarks. You then have management. Management will buff happiness, influence, construction cost, movement on land, construction time. You get military support, so you can get recruitment cost, construction cost reduction, recruitment slots, recruitment rank, more recruitment cost, XP per turn, recruitment rank as well. This is just a better building than the other one, by the way. Though I would see no reason. I actually don't understand. Well, no, it's recruitment cost and rank as opposed to slots and rank. So that's the difference over there. Then a garrison building, and then finally Ursu's war camp that gives him more post-battle loot faction-wide. That's unique to him. Then when it comes to unit recruitment, you have the following buildings. You got the native building chain that goes up to tier 3. You can also build this as a minor settlement. So you can get all the native buildings in all the native units in a province by just building this in a minor settlement and going up to tier 3. Assuming I have a free minor province. There we go. So you can put the native office and just go over there. Getting into tier 4 gives you recruit rank for own armies and morale on recruitment, so it's a benefit. Then you get some unique buildings dependent on the race you're playing. So over here, he's got the Nagib residence, which gives him, like if we're looking at this, we're like sword and shield to hand spear infantry, axe and shield infantry. And then at tier 4, he gets to hand the club infantry. Club infantry is like the way it works, like armor. You got light, medium, heavy. When it comes to damage of melee units, you've got spears, you've got swords, you've got axes, and you've got clubs. Clubs are pure armor piercing, axes are in between, spears are against chariots, and swords are just pure physical damage that doesn't do much against armor. That's how to view the different types of armor. Then you get various archer buildings. Like again, like everything past the native field is dependent on who you're playing. So Ursu, for instance, he's got the Sabnagib residence. He gets the infantry barracks, so he gets a bunch of his own infantry. He has limited archer recruitment unless he's relying on native units. There's plenty of native archers, not necessarily so much heavy infantry. And then then there's chariots. Then you get various production and resource buildings and religious buildings. When it comes to religious buildings, typically you'll just have the various temples to the gods you're worshipping. In this case, since I only will have a 10, I obviously only have that. You can get grand temples for the various gods as well. As for resource production, well, that's an interesting discussion. 1, it depends on who you're playing. 2, it depends on where you're going. It depends on the regions. Some regions will have extra resource production. Like the Nile, for instance, will generate a lot of extra food because it's the Nile, if you're going there. Desert regions might have will have bronze and stone, a lot of it too. The Hittites may have a lot of wood. So those are some of the things to bear in mind. But resource production is certainly far more limited in Pharaoh than it was in Troy. Then you can get things like, production buildings that can increase the production. In the case of Ursu, I just have a building that increases production of all resources by 50% in a region, costs free happiness, but also gives food, income, and workforce growth, so it's generally worth getting. I have so much food I don't know what to do with it, and I can't just spend it all on armies because I don't have bronze to do so. Yeah, bronze is the main limiting factor that exists in the game. You don't want to just waste, you don't have supply lines as far as I see it. As far as I know, you don't have any kind of supply line situation, but you just don't. Well, there are some decent enough units, I suppose, that you can just recruit for food, but really any unit that's worth a damn is going to cost bronze. Chariots are going to cost wood to recruit, not to maintain. And then there's even units that cost gold to recruit and maintain. Though, if they didn't cost bronze at the same time, I would certainly take that deal in terms of just the gold cost. Gold is more plentiful than bronze. There. Yeah, I think the bronze output, economic output, needs a buff. Because generally speaking, when we're looking at bronze, you only get, if I have a structure that does, I do have a bronze mine. I have multiple bronze mines. There we go. There's one. So with bronze, you only get this building that goes to 155. And it's only in these regions that have bronze. And it's not plentiful. There's more gold than bronze on the map. That's a bit weird. And the bronze mines are not necessarily generating a lot. So every faction right now that I'm talking about is in a bronze deficit. Every single one. I don't think I can find one that has... Like, I cannot find one that has a bronze surplus, so I say. And those are some of the basics of the campaign, if you will. There's a lot more to cover, a lot more detail to go into. The research tree is the research tree, right? It does vary a bit depending on who you pick, but it's generally going to be the same. And that's essentially it. I do want to cover the court system, the choice you have with the bloodline, if you will, and with the ancient legacies. But those are the essential aspects that you need to know about the game. When it comes to armies, let me mention this. Heavy infantry wins out in every single battle against any kind of army. Archers are good support, of course, skirmishers, slingers, etc. But the meat of an army is the infantry. The heavier the infantry, the better it is. Why is that? Because for all the discussion about lighter units having maneuverability on the battlefield, ultimately, here's the reality that you're going to deal with. You're dealing with siege battles, you're dealing with settlement battles, you've got choke points. Even on open field battles, you've got choke points. So guess who wins that? And armor piercing also wins out. There's a lot more I could say on that subject, and I do have some fairly strong opinions, suffice to say, but I'm just going to leave it there. Let me talk about the court system, and let me talk about the ancient legacies. Now, talking about the Egyptian crown or the Hittite crown, here's how it goes. In almost every campaign, with the exception of the King of Hatti himself, you have a choice to make. The power of the crown. Here's how this works. Once you get past like turn 10, 13, I think it is 12, 13, regardless, early on in campaign, you do get to decide which throne you want to pursue. You can either pursue the throne of Hatti or you can pursue the throne of Egypt. Now, if you're Egyptian, you can still go for Hatti, but you will need to get your way. You will need to make your way down there and take one of their sacred lands. If you're Hittite and want to go for Egypt, you'll have to do the same. Well, if you're Kurunta, anyway, at any rate. Now, if you're Canaanite, you can just pay 1,000 gold. You don't have to make your way there. You start in between them. Making your way there is not a great... Like, if you're not in the area, if you don't start in the area, making your way to the other side is not a great idea because you're going to lose a lot in the early game. Sure, you could go for a longer campaign, but I mean, there are certainly benefits to be had with potentially the other crown, but generally speaking, that is the main limiting factor. The Canaanites can just bribe their way more or less to power for 1,000 gold. Now, once you select a crown to pursue, either the royal tradition of Egypt or Hatti, the game will tell you what you're signing up for. So you get Hittite legitimacy, you get power of crown, you get great king power, all that. This, by the way, is the same campaign I showed earlier, but this was obviously a much earlier save. The way the system works is the king, either the great king or the pharaoh, will start with a fairly good amount of legitimacy. Shupul-Yuma, he's in a desperate situation, so he doesn't have as much legitimacy as the pharaoh. The pharaoh, however, is going to die shortly after the game starts, about turn 20 or so, and the civil war is going to start that. How it works with the civil war is you need to get 3/4 of the legitimacy of the king or the great king or pharaoh to declare yourself to contest the crown. And you declare war on the person that's wearing the crown at that point and their vassals. So you may end up having to fight a lot of factions, especially if you're trying to do that if you're trying to pull that shit off in Egypt. If you go against the reigning pharaoh in Egypt until he dies, you're gonna have a lot of factions who are gonna fight at the same time. It's not a great deal if you're playing SETI to do so. Now, the Civil War, the way that works is once you declare it, every faction that joins the Civil War will add several more turns to the Civil War. Eventually you'll run out of factions that can add to it. Typically, I would say a Civil War may not last longer than 20 turns. Once it's over, the faction that has the most amount of legitimacy wins. You don't need to fight the current king. You don't need to fight any contender, actually. You can just spend your time fighting minor factions, taking sacred lands, building up legitimacy. But regardless, whoever has the most legitimacy and is still standing at the end of the day is the one that becomes king, the great king of Hatti, or Pharaoh of Egypt. That is the system. And you don't stop caring about legitimacy once you become king, because you obviously want to keep contenders at bay, but you also can unlock powers. The items are tied to either the title or to certain settlements. Like, for instance, this is tied to Kurunta's starring settlement. This is tied to Hattusa. So these two items are tied to the two legendary lords of Hatti. And one is available if you just become king. The pharaohs have their fancy hats. Like, you get 2 fancy hats, and you can get several more by occupying certain special settlements. Then you have various powers. The powers do vary a bit, like you can get growth, a surplus point if you're Egypt, but the most important thing is you can annex a faction. And the way the powers work, tier 1, tier 3, tier 4. Like, it goes, you have 2 tier 1 powers. The choice is permanent. The only way to reverse this, so to speak, is like, let's say you picked Inspired Troops at tier 1, but then you want to put that at tier 4. Well, if you put that at tier 3, it will become permanent at tier 3 unless you put that at tier 4. Let's say you put something at tier 1 and then you put it at tier 4. The tier 1 slot is going to be made open and you'll be able to pick something else. So it's fine to pick whatever you think is most powerful at tier 1 because you'll be able to put it at a higher tier later on. Just keep in mind that once you put something in tier 4, you can't change it, and obviously you do only have one tier 2 slot, tier 3, and tier 4 slot, so you do have to make a decision where you're going to put every single one of these powers once you gain them. The powers will take like 500 legitimacy to unlock all these powers is something that's going to take a fairly long time. The system is designed for a long campaign. It's not designed for a short campaign. Do you need it to win it? No, it's a nice benefit to be sure. It may help with the end game. It might be necessary in the end game, but in the early game, you're perfectly fine not even engaging in that. You don't need to rush for the crown. You might set the first Civil War out. Or you might just accrue a lot of legitimacy and jump in on the last moment and win. That's what I did as Zaman Mess in the campaign I was playing as him. Now, beyond that, when you go for the crown, you get Ancient Legacies. Egypt has 4. The Hittites have 2. Now, I'll talk about these in a separate video, but you get the choice. And once you make a choice, it's a permanent choice in a campaign. It's tied to the throne, it's not tied to the legendary lord. So, for instance, Hatti have either one that keeps their vassal happy and let their gratitude strengthen you. Now, it will tell you, it will give you some idea of what you're going to get in with this. But like, for instance, here, I can craft equipment, get instant construction, gain use of an embedded informant in diplomacy, gain 1 court action, and gain the Tempered by War effect. Tempered by War gives XP from battles. So those are the kind of choices. Now, speaking about the court, you then have the court system. Like, once you pursue a particular crown, you will get access to the court system. Now, there are several positions here. They'll all be taken. Or, well, the Egyptian ones will be taken, not the Hatti ones. But those will also be taken pretty quickly in a campaign. So if you're looking to claim a spot, you might want to hurry with that. The person who's king, or Pharaoh can eventually secure multiple slots for their own faction, but it is going to be difficult. The way this system works is that every position has some kind of benefit. So, for instance, the High Commander has units with special has units in the special recruitment, global recruitment tab, and you can ask him for that. You can also set army wages, and he gets the flanking maneuverability for his own army. Now, on Shemsu Hor, he can set lower unit upkeep. So you can set army wages. No, recruitment costs. My apologies. So you can lower recruitment costs by 25% for one unit. If you're king or if you're Pharaoh, you can ask for 2 units. It's 2 units if you're High Commander, by the way. But the way this works is you need to get a regard, which requires assists, which requires you an assist. You can gossip if you're Egyptian. But since Irsu is not exactly the most diplomatic person, he's gonna have to pay gold to get regard. And once you get 60 regard, you can engage in various actions. Now, what about plot against and intrigue beyond assisting? Well, let's say you want to get the spot. Let's say you want to get the High Judge, right? There's various actions, like the High Judge. He can allow you to take a ruling. Taking a ruling has you make a decision, generally one that gives you a benefit. Either food, stone, faction-wide benefits. There are some downsides potentially with some of those decisions, but generally you're going to get a huge benefit by making those rulings. You can only make one per year, basically, one of those rulings. You can also quash a rebellion, or you can reduce the cost of buildings. This is why I say buildings are meaningless, because you can always reduce the cost as well. You can get some special buildings, all that. Now, what about conspire and plot against? Well, plot against is something you can use to either gain legitimacy or regard. Like, discredit will give you legitimacy, blackmail will give you regard, and threaten will remove them from the position. The way this works is that let's say I want the High Judge, right? So I start the threaten plot. Now, if I click this button, it will fail, right? It is going to fail. So what I need to do is increase it. The way you can increase it, well, there are possibilities. There are possibilities over here. So one of the things you can do is, like, you can set the success chance of one of your threaten plots to 100% if you so desire. That just has one choice over there. Or you can improve all your active plots by 1 level. So there are various choices. Generally, a plot is to remove someone from a position, but it's not just that. You can assassinate people as well. You can embezzle. You can engage in embezzlement as well. So there are various choices, of course, but generally you want to get the benefits. You may want to remove people from the positions they occupy, and to do so you need to engage in a plot, specifically threatening them to force them to leave the court.
The 1,000 gods
that is how that works. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. I think from a campaign system perspective, there's a lot of things I do like. The battles, not as much. Have I been enjoying my time playing the game? It's a mixed bag, to say the least. I'm not going to give any firm opinion yet. I think I need to play a lot more, and also embargo. So stay tuned for more.